Common Ground Conversations. Yes. Take one. Who are you and what do y'all do?
My name is Emily Green, and I am a co-founder of Common Ground Conversations on Race in America with my husband.
I'm Mike Green, and what I do outside of Common Ground Conversations on Race in America doesn't fit into a box. I'm a cultural economist, I'm an economic strategist, I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm an educator and historian. And I do all of those things, and the result is Common Ground Conversations on Race in America. But I also work on a national scale with lots of institutional partners at the National Institute for Inclusive Competitiveness, where I'm an economic strategist. So I'm wearing multiple hats, but clearly my work, my life's work, is ingrained in Common Ground Conversations on Race in America, and we'll tell you why.
So how long have y'all been married?
We've been married for 16 years.
Yes.
16 great years.
Anniversary in February 20th.
Yes.
Will be 17 years.
That's right. That's right.
Like showing off, like, good job, Mike.
That's right. You got the date.
Did y'all meet here in Southern Oregon?
We didn't actually. We met in San Diego when Mike was an AM talk radio host, and I heard him on the radio.
I spent 20 years in media after 12 years in the military as a Navy engineer. During my 20 years in media, I started in talk radio. And it's kind of interesting because I didn't expect to get into talk radio, but I got into talk radio because I was involved in after-school programs for at-risk youth. And I won an award, and I did a lot of interviews, and someone said, you should do radio. And so I did. Ended up getting my own show in San Diego, and that's how Emily and I met.
That's right.
How long have y'all been up here in Southern Oregon?
So we moved back here. I'm from Southern Oregon, and we moved up here the year before we got married. So 17 years.
And I'm originally from Houston, Texas. So coming from Houston to Oregon, where I'd never been before, was quite a paradigm shift.
What did it look like culturally in the area that you grew up in Houston?
So I grew up on the south side of Houston in the 60s and 70s. I was raised by my mom and lots of other women that were part of our family, grandmas, aunts. My dad left when we were young. He and my mom divorced and left her with 5 kids to raise in the South in the 60s and 70s. We grew up on the black side of town, and life wasn't easy there, but we stuck together. I have 2 sisters, 2 brothers, and I'm the oldest boy. And trying to find my way early in life wasn't easy without having the kind of father figure that I had hoped to have.
Were you exposed to a large number or any Black-owned businesses in your immediate area as a child?
So what's interesting about the businesses in our neighborhood, we had a grocery store. It was owned by a white man. We had another smaller grocery store. It was owned by an Asian couple. The only business owner I actually knew was the barber. Everybody knew the barber. And unless you count drug dealing as owning a business, that's pretty much what facilitated a lot of the revenue in our community.
As a business owner, what did that do for you?
When I was growing up, there wasn't really a thought about owning a business. It was, you needed to get a job. And so you needed to make good grades to go to college and get a good job. And if you could join the military or if you could get a government job, that was par for the course. That's where that's where the dream was for most of the kids my age. Just get a good education, get a good job. And that was the mantra. Owning a business, that was not something that I even thought or saw myself doing at any point in time that I can remember in my youth.
What was it? When was it? Where was it that you were like, oh, I can do this. I am going to do this. I'm going to own a business. I'm not going to just get a decent education and just get a decent job. When was it where you had your mind made up that you were going to have more?
So it's really interesting how I got into entrepreneurship. Again, I had not considered myself an entrepreneur. Throughout my life, I have tried new things. I wasn't afraid of trying new things, and I wasn't afraid of failing. I realized that failure created the guideposts to success. So if I didn't try, I wasn't going to succeed. And if I tried, I knew I wasn't going to succeed on the very first try. So I had to try. And the failure taught me something. And it continued to guide me toward the place I need to go. So I succeeded when I was in the military. Lots of racism in the military. And yet I won Sailor of the Year aboard a combat ship carrying Marines and SEALs all over the country. I was on 2 combat ships, and ultimately that led me to recruiting. I won every award there was in recruiting. After I left the Navy, I went into media, didn't know anything about media, ultimately won dozens of awards, including some of the top awards in media, and I was selected as a New York Times Leadership Academy Fellow. I studied social media with CNN and ultimately ran newsrooms, both weekly newsrooms and daily newsrooms. And ultimately, after 20 years in media, leading the newsrooms from print heavy into the digital innovation era, I realized that the industry itself was behind the curve. And because I was also a data analyst, as I got into digital media, I became a data analyst, and I was training reporters to also be aware of how we're integrating with data, how we're integrating with platforms, and how we're integrating with the community and the community voice. So as media began to slow its role toward digital platforms and sort of pull back, holding on to print, I moved forward and I stepped away from media in 2009, right after I won another round of awards. The very first time we entered into competition for digital awards, my newsroom swept all of them in the state of Oregon. And it was right after that round of awards that I said, I gotta go. You guys are too slow. What's happening out there is too fast. And I started my very first company focused on tech entrepreneurship and creating virtual worlds from real worlds. And it was called Visit Now, and that was my very first company. And in developing that company, I had to learn on the fly. I had to learn about equity investments, angel investors, and venture capitalists. I had to learn about the innovation economy. I had to learn about the fourth industrial revolution that's accelerating the pace of obsolescence. I had to learn about entrepreneurial ecosystems. I had to learn about, on the fly, all of the things that I ultimately began to mentor other entrepreneurs about. I had to learn and be self-taught through failure and success.
Did you have any struggles?
Okay. So it's interesting because throughout my life, struggles have been part of the game. So I don't get down because things are hard. They've been hard from the get-go. And My family is very competitive. We're not just competitive in sports, we're competitive in everything. So if I set my mind to do something, I know there's going to be opposition. I know there's going to be deprivation. I know I'm not going to have the resources I need. That is not going to stop me. Because at the end of the day, if I could look back and tell my 15-year-old self what I know now, I would tell myself, don't be afraid. You are chosen. And the one who chose you knows the path. Don't be afraid. And so throughout my life, I've never been afraid to take that leap. So when I left media, which was a comfortable place, I was making a decent living, and I left and stepped out into entrepreneurship and realized here's a world that I don't know. And as I got into that world, I'm in the world of white men, older white men. And I'm giving them ideas that they don't have very much experience with. And they're listening to a black man tell them about what we now know as virtual worlds and artificial intelligence and virtual reality. And they're listening to me pitch them to get an investment from them. And they're not accepting that I know what I'm talking about. Because every time I walk into a room, and this has been all my life, I have to prove that I know what I'm talking about. I have to overcome this perception that I'm inferior or that my mentality is inferior. And so I realize that that's an obstacle. But when I get the no, that doesn't mean that I can't go forward. It just means I have to go somewhere else. And so in this world of white men, I realized something. There weren't very many people that looked like me on either side of that tech equation, as tech entrepreneurs or tech investors. And so I wrote a 4-part series in the Huffington Post called The Innovation Crisis in Black America. The Innovation Crisis in Black America. And people came from all over the nation to talk to me. And ultimately, I ran into a gentleman, a former NFL player by the name of Jonathan Holyfield. And Jonathan was the one man who I realized really understood what was going on. And he and I formed a consultancy called Scale Up Partners in 2010. And we began to talk around the nation about inclusive competitiveness. Not charitable handouts, but that Black people have innovative ideas. We have creativity. We have strong work ethics. We have a history and legacy of success. We can compete. And if our talent is cultivated, we will add to the economic competitiveness of this nation. Inclusive competitiveness was this theoretical idea of changing the strategies, the policies, and the practices nationwide to incorporate the talent that has been marginalized and sitting on the sidelines for decades. Inclusive competitiveness ultimately became something that was adopted all over the country. Jonathan ended up in the White House as the director for the White House initiative on HBCUs. Ultimately, Congress passed a law called the HBCU Partners Act that mandates every February 1st, all 32 federal agencies will submit to Congress their HBCU competitiveness strategy for investing in increasing the capacity of HBCUs in this country. That came out of inclusive competitiveness policy, public policy that affects everyone in these marginalized communities. Now, that being said, at the same time that we were pushing and socializing inclusive competitiveness, I met Dr. Jamie Bracey Green through Jonathan, who ultimately operationalized inclusive competitiveness at the Center for Inclusive Competitiveness at the College of Engineering at Temple University in Philadelphia. That led to the development of the National Institute for Inclusive Competitiveness, which I am the chief strategist now and working with a number of different parties We just received a $1 million grant from the EDA, from the Economic Development Administration, to produce a demonstration project in Philadelphia around developing a circular economy in one of the most distressed communities, 99% Black, in the country. And so we're not just theorizing, we're actually operationalizing and putting into practice pilot demonstrations that help the nation see that this mass of Black humanity that has been targeted for more than a century since the Civil War has been neglected, has been deprived, has been denied access to resources, has been left to languish and exile in their own land, as Dr. King would say, actually has the capability to bring solutions to the table that can benefit the entire nation. Now, that being said, at the same time, Jonathan and I realized we were doing something very unique in that everywhere we went, we had to educate policymakers, we had to educate leaders, we had to educate the people who were in positions of power, wealth, and influence. And that education is something that translates into common ground conversations. I was talking with my wife one day about what I do, and then she shared with me something that led to the idea for developing a workshop on how to talk to kids about race. You want to tell them what you
I remember where we were driving. I remember the road, and we were in the car together, and it was February, and I suggested that we create a workshop on how to talk to kids about race in America. And the idea was born, and it was something that just flowed so naturally out of Mike's gifting and talent and my background and training, that just sort of merged together. And we created our workshop really based on how we live this in our home and in our family. And people were asking us, what does it look like, and how do the Greens navigate conversations about race? And so,
and this was after our boys gave a presentation. Our boys, Caleb and Josiah, gave a presentation at a homeschool co-op on Dr. Martin Luther King. And what they provided as in their presentation actually taught their teachers something they didn't know.
And beyond that, there were conversations that we were having at home, just around our kitchen table, that we continue to have to this day. That I realized for many people, I had a lot of friends actually saying, what does that look like? How do the Greens have these conversations? Because people feel and have expressed feeling unsure if they should even have conversations about race, and if they did, how would it even look? And so we sort of said, let's share how we approach it. And that birthed our workshop in 2019. That in 2020 became Common Ground Conversations on Race in America. So we have the great delight of partnering together.
So what I learned through all of my experience in working for myself, working for others, and starting on this journey of entrepreneurship is that you must build a team. You cannot do this by yourself. No one can. We're all dependent upon one another. Economics is a team sport. And so the importance of the team cannot be overstated. The challenge that I've had, the biggest challenge that I've had, is not making mistakes myself, but it's making mistakes in who I choose to be part of my team. And so that is a very careful decision. Well, it was an easy decision when we started Common Ground Conversations. Is one of the reasons why it has grown in leaps and bounds in such a short period of time, because of who's on my team. We work together. We're iron sharpening iron. We make sure that my weakness is my wife's strength. Her weakness is my strength. And we fit together, and we have a common understanding of our mission. And we work together well because, we've had 16 years of practice.
Partnering with Mike has been so incredible and valuable because we have trust. And I trust his heart, I trust his wisdom, I trust his leadership. And so I can offer encouragement, and he can offer, again, as he said, we have complementary gifts, and we have a deep respect and trust with each other that allows a sense of flourishing in our work together.
At the National Institute, we have a very common mantra: equity equals ownership. Ownership of lands, homes, businesses, and intellectual property. Equity equals ownership. If you want to get to racial equity, you have to measure ownership. What do you own? Lands, homes, businesses, intellectual property. In order to get to equity, in order to get to equitable ownership, you have to have equitable access to resources that allow you to gain equitable ownership. So when equitable access to resources is quality education. It's a tragedy that the most vulnerable populations of children in our country are ubiquitously served by the worst quality schools in the world's richest nation. If we are not going to provide them with a quality resource environment and an infrastructure that supports them, then certainly we're not helping them build the dream, we're killing their dreams. So yes, I believe in generational wealth, and I believe that the key to the pathway to generational wealth is through equitable access to resources that lead to equitable ownership of lands, homes, businesses, and intellectual property. And when we talk about businesses, we live in a fourth industrial revolution. This is a knowledge-based, tech-driven, globally competitive, innovation economy fueled by a fourth industrial revolution that's accelerating the pace of obsolescence every year. If we are not exposing our children to fourth industrial revolution growth stage industries and opportunities, if we're not undergirding their STEM or STEAM education with entrepreneurship, then we are advocating for their failure. Then we are killing their dreams. We're not giving them the path that they need to walk. So we must ensure that they have equitable access to resources, that they have a pathway to equitable ownership of lands, homes, businesses, and intellectual property. And certainly their education must be undergirded with exposure to and cultivation of their entrepreneurial spirit. There's this idea that we need to teach our children financial literacy. And that's for sure, because whatever money you get in the door, you need to know how to use that money. You need to know how to save. You need to know the ins and outs of budgeting. That's financial literacy. What we're not teaching our kids is economic literacy. How do you make money? How do you create businesses? How do you create jobs from businesses that are growing? How do you understand the innovation economy in your region or any other region? How do you understand innovation in entrepreneurial ecosystems? Where's that kind of education? Not just financial literacy for personal finance, but economics of entire nations, economics of entire regions. Where do you get that information? Well, for teenagers, I would recommend that, one, remember this: you will never be able to pass to the next generation your job. I'm a cultural economist. I'm an economic strategist. My kid is not going to be inheriting my job. Not going to happen. I better create something, build something that's going to have valued assets that I can pass to my children. So land, homes, businesses, intellectual property. Those are the kinds of things that I know have value and can be passed on to my children. Now, if I'm a teenager, what do I want to do? I want to look for the kind of people who own those kinds of things, who own lands, who own homes, who own businesses, particularly businesses that are growing businesses, that are creating jobs. And I want to learn what they did, how they did it. And here's the wonderful thing about people who own businesses. If you walk into a business and you ask a business owner, how did you do this? They will take you aside and talk to you. They will love the fact that you had the courage, that you had the interest to come and ask them. And they will spend that time to help you learn and teach you. They will become your mentor. Don't be afraid to ask people, how did you do this or that? Because they will take the time to show you. So here's what I suggest to everyone. 2 things. 1, dream. 2, ask. Find someone who is doing what you want to do. Ask that person, how did you do what you're doing? Find someone who's already on the path ahead of you. Ask that person, can I follow you? Dream. And then find someone who is living that dream and ask, can I follow you? Can I learn from you? Can I help you?